This presentation is titled The North Island of New Zealand. Let's examine the history of New Zealand from Dominion status to current times. We will also examine the North Island's outstanding natural beauty, key places of interest, along with significant events from a geological and geographical viewpoint. This is part 2 of my New Zealand series. I would suggest that you watch my presentation on the South Island first, as it contains the early history of New Zealand. In this presentation, we embark on a journey to the heart of Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand's North Island, or Te Ika a Maui. This vibrant island, shaped by powerful volcanic forces and steeped in rich Maori history, is home to the majority of New Zealand's population and offers an incredibly diverse tapestry of experiences, from bustling cosmopolitan cities and geothermal wonders to stunning coastlines and pristine native forests. Join me as we explore the unique blend of culture, adventure, and breathtaking landscapes that define this extraordinary part of the world. Putting things into perspective, you can see from this map that we can easily squeeze New Zealand onto the eastern seaboard of the United States, with Florida and New England to spare. I am now going to continue the events that shaped New Zealand's history, continuing on from my presentation about the South Island. The Russians are coming, the 17th of February 1873. On the 17th of February 1873, Aucklanders awoke to the alarming news that a Russian warship had entered Auckland harbour undetected and landed troops. For many readers, this seemed to confirm their worst fears. Anglo-Russian conflicts during the 19th century prompted many New Zealanders to view the Russians as potential aggressors. In the aftermath of the Crimean War of the 1850s, unannounced visits to the South Pacific by Russian warships created alarm in New Zealand. David Lucky, editor of the Daily Southern Cross, exploited this fear to boost sales, publishing a hoax report of a Russian invasion of Auckland by the ironclad cruiser Kaskoviski. Despite an asterisk in the story's headline referring to a date almost 3 months in the future, Aucklanders were alarmed to read that Marines from the Kaskoviski had seized gold and taken the mayor hostage. Many historians considered this event to be the stimulus that prompted the New Zealanders to create their own navy. On the 19th of September 1893, New Zealand became the first self-governing country to give women the right to vote in parliamentary elections. The Electoral Act was signed into law by then-Governor Lord Glasgow and came about after years of suffrage movements and petitions. These campaigns were led by Kate Shepherd and inspired by the American-based Women's Christian Temperance Union. At the start of the 20th century, the British Admiralty maintained that naval defence of the British Empire, including the Dominions, should be unified under the Royal Navy. Attitudes on this matter softened during the first decade, and at the 1909 Imperial Conference, the Admiralty proposed the creation of fleet units, forces consisting of a battle cruiser, 3 light cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 3 submarines. While Australia and Canada were encouraged to purchase fleet units to serve as the core of new national navies, other fleet units would be operated by the Royal Navy at distant bases, particularly in the Far East. New Zealand was asked to partially subsidize a fleet unit for the China Station. To this end, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Sir Joseph Ward, announced on 22nd of March 1909 that his country would fund a battleship as an example to other countries. It is unclear why this design was selected, given that it was known to be inferior to the battle cruisers entering service with the Imperial German Navy. The New Zealand government took out a loan to fund the cost of the ship. New Zealand was one of 3 Indefatigable-class battlecruisers built for the defence of the British Empire. Launched in 1911, the ship was funded by the government of New Zealand as a gift to Britain and she was commissioned into the Royal Navy in 1912. Her design was already obsolescent when she was built. Nevertheless, she went on to have a distinguished World War I career when she was present in all three major naval battles, Heligoland, Dogger Bank, and Jutland in the North Sea. She was broken up for scrap in 1922 in order to meet the United Kingdom's tonnage limit in the disarmament provisions of the Washington Naval Treaty. The Gallipoli campaign was a major military operation during World War I, fought from February 1915 to January 1916 on the Gallipoli Peninsula in the Ottoman Empire, modern-day Turkey. The primary goal of the Allied powers, mainly Britain, France, Australia, and New Zealand, with support from India and Newfoundland, was to seize control of the Dardanelles Straits. This would allow them to open a sea route to Russia, threaten the Ottoman capital of Constantinople, Istanbul, and potentially knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. It is generally agreed that the Gallipoli campaign during the First World War fostered a sense of national identity in New Zealand and Australia. 1 in 4 New Zealand men between the ages of 20 and 45 who were sent to battle were either killed or wounded. In Gallipoli, there were 2,779 New Zealand casualties, as well as 8,700 Australian deaths. Anzac Day on 25th of April remembers the death of these soldiers. Continuing on with events that shaped New Zealand's history. On the 3rd of February 1931, the Hawke's Bay region was struck by New Zealand's deadliest earthquake. The epicenter was located near the Hawke's Bay region on the east coast of the North Island. The cities of Napier and Hastings bore the brunt of the devastation. A total of 256 people died, with thousands more injured. The earthquake caused widespread destruction to buildings and infrastructure. The earthquake had a magnitude variously reported between 7.4 and 7.8. As a silver lining, the rebuild efforts transformed the Hawke's Bay into a thriving Art Deco region. New Zealand's journey to independence from Britain wasn't a single event, but rather a gradual evolution marked by several key constitutional and political developments. It's often described as a slow move to independence rather than a definitive Independence Day. 1840. Treaty of Waitangi and colony status. New Zealand officially became a British colony with the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. Initially, it was a crown colony, meaning it was directly ruled by a governor appointed by Britain. 1852. Self-government and representative institutions. The New Zealand Constitution Act 1852 granted New Zealand self-governing status. This established a national government with an elected House of Representatives, though the British governor still retained significant power, particularly over Maori affairs and foreign relations. 1907. Dominion status. New Zealand formally became the Dominion of New Zealand. This was a symbolic recognition of its growing maturity and self-governing capacity within the British Empire, but it didn't fundamentally alter its legal relationship with Britain. New Zealand still considered itself closely tied to the mother country. 1931. Statute of Westminster. The British Parliament passed the Statute of Westminster. This act granted full legal autonomy to the self-governing dominions, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Irish Free State, and Newfoundland. It essentially meant that the British Parliament could no longer make laws for these dominions unless they requested and consented to it. 1947. Adoption of the Statute of Westminster. Despite the statute being passed in 1931, New Zealand was the last dominion to adopt it, doing so with the Statute of Westminster Adoption Act 1947. This delay was largely due to New Zealand's strong sense of loyalty to Britain, particularly after World War II. Its adoption, however, was a crucial legal step, formally removing Britain's power to legislate for New Zealand. 1986. The Constitution Act. This was a highly significant step towards full legal independence. The Constitution Act 1986 was passed by the New Zealand Parliament. It repealed the New Zealand Constitution Act 1852 and formally ended the ability of the British Parliament to make laws for New Zealand, even with consent. It also clarified and consolidated many aspects of New Zealand's constitutional arrangements, confirming New Zealand's Parliament as supreme. 2003, creation of the Supreme Court. New Zealand established its own Supreme Court, replacing Britain's Privy Council as the country's final court of appeal. This was a logical judicial landmark, asserting New Zealand's control over its own legal destiny. The Dawn Raids were a series of highly controversial and discriminatory immigration enforcement actions carried out in New Zealand, primarily between 1974 and 1976, though they began under the Labour government in 1974 and intensified under the national government elected in 1975. For decades, New Zealand actively encouraged immigration from Pacific Island nations, like Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and the Cook Islands, to fill labor shortages in its growing manufacturing and primary production sectors. Many Pacific Islanders came on temporary visas or permits, often with the expectation that these could be extended or that pathways to residency would be available. The economy faced significant challenges in the early 1970s, including a decline in international wool prices, Britain joining the European Economic Community, which impacted New Zealand's export markets, and the 1973 oil crisis. This led to rising unemployment and social anxieties. The government instructed police and immigration officials to rigorously enforce visa conditions. This involved raids on the homes of suspected overstayers, often in the early hours of the morning, hence dawn raids, as well as checks at workplaces, churches, and on the street. While overstayers came from various nationalities, including a significant number from Britain, Australia, and South Africa, the vast majority of those targeted, questioned, and deported were Pacific Islanders. This was despite Pacific peoples making up only about 1/3 of the total overstayer population. These raids were often aggressive, with police reportedly not allowing some individuals to dress properly, leading to court appearances in pajamas. The dawn raids caused immense trauma, fear, and insecurity within Pacific communities in New Zealand. Families were broken up, and individuals faced deportation back to countries they may have left years earlier. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, in August 2020, has apologized for the 1970s dawn raids. Let's now turn our attention to the sinking of the Rainbow Warrior. This boat was the flagship of Greenpeace, an international environmental organization. In 1985, it was in the Pacific Ocean campaigning against nuclear weapons testing, specifically targeting French nuclear tests at the Mururoa Atoll in French Polynesia. The ship was in Auckland to take on supplies and meet with a flotilla of yachts that intended to sail to Mururoa in protest. New Zealand had a well-established anti-nuclear stance by the mid-1980s. The attack happened just before midnight on July 10th. 2 limpet mines planted by French Secret Service agents, Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure, or DGSE, exploded on the hull of the Rainbow Warrior. The first bomb created a hole, and as crew members began to evacuate, a second larger bomb detonated. The ship sank rapidly. The bombing in Auckland was the first act of terrorism in New Zealand territory, and while it was targeted at Greenpeace protests against nuclear testing, New Zealanders took the attack personally. This ultimately led to deteriorating relations between New Zealand and France for the remainder of the 20th century. Initially, France denied any involvement. However, under intense international pressure and media scrutiny, the French Prime Minister Laurent Fabius eventually admitted that French agents had been responsible for the attack and had acted under orders. This admission led to the resignation of the French Defense Minister Charles Ernoult and the firing of the head of the DGSE, Pierre Lacoste. The final event in my discussion of New Zealand's history happened in 1997 when Jenny Shipley became New Zealand's first female Prime Minister after a successful campaign to oust her predecessor Jim Bolger. Between 1990 and 1997, she held several ministerial portfolios, including women's affairs, social welfare, and health. Shipley left Parliament in 1998, paving the way for the first elected female Prime Minister, Helen Clark, to come to power in 1999. I am now turning my attention to the countryside and natural features of the North Island. This map shows the location of the next 4 places I will discuss, namely Putangirua Pinnacles, Cooper's Sail, Red Rocks, and then the town of Wellington. The Putangirua Pinnacles are a geological formation and one of New Zealand's best examples of badlands erosion. They consist of a large number of earth pillars or hoodoos located at the head of a valley in the Aorangi Ranges in the Wellington region. The majestic pinnacles were formed over the past 120,000 years by heavy rain, which gradually eroded an ancient gravel deposit into pinnacles or hoodoos. Cooper's Sail Palliser Bay, Wairarapa, is the result of an earthquake creating this flat ridge, which is said to look like a sail. The sails are outcrops of late Miocene sandstone, dipping west at an angle of 45 degrees. Red Rocks, Pariwero, is an area of national significance with fascinating geology and Maori history. Red-colored rocks that were formed 200 million years ago. Iron oxide is responsible for the red color. Maori folklore tells 2 stories relating to the color of the rocks. In one, Kupe, the famous Polynesian explorer, was gathering power, shellfish, here when one clamped his hand. He bled and stained the rocks red. In the other story, the red is the blood of Kupe's daughters. Fearing for their father's safety on a long voyage, they gashed themselves. Wellington takes its name from Arthur Wellesley, the first Duke of Wellington, and victor of the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. It was named in November 1840 by the original settlers of the New Zealand Company. The legendary Maori explorer Kupe, a chief from Hawaii, was said to have stayed in the harbour around the years 1200 to 1300. The city's location close to the mouth of the narrow Cook Strait leaves it vulnerable to strong gales, leading to the nickname of Windy Wellington. Before Wellington, Auckland served as the capital from 1841. However, as the population of the South Island grew, particularly with the gold rushes in Otago and Canterbury, the northern location of Auckland became increasingly inconvenient for South Island members of Parliament. Travel was difficult and time-consuming in those days, making a more central meeting point crucial for national unity and efficient governance. Wellington, situated at the southern tip of the North Island on the Cook Strait, was seen as a much more accessible and central point for both major islands. The growing population and economic power of the South Island in the 1860s led to some discussion about the possibility of the South Island forming its own separate colony. Moving the capital to a more central location like Wellington helped to reinforce the idea of a unified New Zealand and address the concerns of the South Island. Wellington was declared a city in 1840 and was chosen to be the capital city of New Zealand in 1865. The Wellington Old Shoreline Heritage Trail is a fascinating walk that takes you on a journey through Wellington's dramatic history, highlighting how much the city's landscape has changed over the past 160 plus years. It essentially traces the path of Wellington's former shoreline, which has been significantly altered by both natural events and extensive human intervention. Much of Wellington's central business district, including areas like Lambton Quay, is built on reclaimed land. In the early days of European settlement, land was scarce, and the city quickly expanded by filling in parts of the harbour. To trace the original shoreline in Lambton Harbour, that is, before any reclamation took place, the Historic Places Trust has placed 14 plaques around the city to mark the original 1840 shoreline. The trail vividly illustrates this by showing you how far the original 1840 shoreline was from the current waterfront. Wellington is situated in a highly active seismic zone due to its location at the boundary of the Pacific and Australian tectonic plates. Several fault lines crisscross the region, but the most significant one running directly through the city is the Wellington Fault, about 25 to 30 kilometers below the city. It is primarily a dextral right lateral strike-slip fault, meaning the land on opposite sides of the fault moves horizontally past each other, with the western side moving north relative to the eastern side. There's also some vertical movement, with the western hills being uplifted. The fault has played a significant role in shaping Wellington's distinctive landscape. Wellington Harbour, for example, is thought to have formed partly due to the depression created by fault movement. The uplift of the western hills, like those around Karori and Kelburn, is also a direct result of the fault's activity. In fact, Wellington may be the only city in the world to have a large sign indicating the location of a major fault line. Let's shift gears and talk about some of Wellington's active geology. The 1855 Wairarapa earthquake was a monumental event in New Zealand's history, fundamentally reshaping the landscape of the Wellington region and influencing its development. It is considered the most powerful earthquake recorded in New Zealand since systematic European colonization began in 1840. It was estimated at a massive magnitude 8.2, making it an incredibly powerful event. The earthquake caused dramatic land uplift. This uplift dramatically changed Wellington Harbour. Areas that were previously shallow water or tidal flats were suddenly raised above sea level. This newly exposed land became the foundation for much of Wellington's future expansion, particularly in areas like Lambton Key, which was once the shoreline. Mount Victoria, also known by its Maori names Tangi Te Keo and Matairangi, is a prominent 643-foot hill located immediately east of central Wellington. It's a hugely popular spot for both locals and tourists due to its stunning panoramic views of the city, harbour and surrounding hills. The summit offers spectacular 360-degree views of Wellington City, its bustling harbour, the rugged coast, and even the distant Southern Alps on a clear day. It's an ideal spot for photography and simply taking in the beauty of the region. About 2 miles due south is a spur named Mount Albert, and the two are linked by a ridge. Wellington Airport's new air traffic control tower opened in August 2018. Sure, it leans purposely, designed to withstand Wellington's winds and a tsunami. Built in the car park of the shopping centre, which is situated next to the runway, this tower replaces the old one, which was located in a residential street and had its own mailbox, number 36, as if it were just another house on the street. It was the only air traffic tower in the world to call a residential street home. Moving up the North Island, I want to mention Mount Taranaki and the Tongariro National Park. Mount Taranaki is an active stratovolcano and one of New Zealand's most notable landmarks. Soaring 8,261 feet above sea level, also known as Mount Egmont, the snow-covered peak and surrounding slopes located on the west coast of North Island offers many leisure activities. The symmetrical shape and majestic beauty of Mount Taranaki is reminiscent of Japan's Mount Fuji. As the location of 3 significant and active volcanoes, Tongariro National Park is the site of rich history and Maori legend. New Zealand's oldest park is also a World Heritage Site, and it offers visitors many geological and scenic vistas that have become even more famous due to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The mountains at the heart of the park hold immense cultural and spiritual significance for the Maori people, particularly the Ngati Tuharatoa Iwi tribe. They symbolize the deep spiritual connection between the community and their environment. Many of the summits, including Ngauruhoe and Ruapehu, are considered tapu, sacred. In 1887, Paramount Chief Te Heuheu Tukino IV of Ngati Tuharatoa gifted the central volcanic area to the Crown with the intent that it be protected for all time. This visionary act led to the establishment of the national park in 1894. New Zealand is home to the town with the longest name in the world. Let's see if I can say it. Taumata Whakatangi Hanga Koawa Wota Matea Turipukaka Piki Maunga Horonu. Translation from Maori goes something like this: the place where Tamatea, the man on the big knees who slipped, climbed and swallowed mountains, known as the Land Eater, he played the flute to his loved one. Moving further up the North Island, let's look at some more natural wonders, including the Mangaotaki Rocks, the craters of the Moon, and Great Lake Taupo. The Mangaotaki Rocks are a geological and cinematic gem tucked away near Piopio in the Waikato region of the North Island. The Otorohanga limestone forms conspicuous near vertical cliffs and widespread karst topography. One standout feature is the Mangaotaki Wave Rock, a curved limestone overhang resembling a breaking wave. The rocks served as the backdrop for several scenes in the movie The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, including Trollshaw's Forest and Staddle Farm. Surrounding the rocks are native prehistoric forests, including towering kahikatea trees, which you can explore via the Mangaotaki Walk. Craters of the Moon, located just north of Taupo on the North Island, is a surreal geothermal wonderland that feels like stepping onto another planet. The area is dotted with hundreds of steam vents that hiss and billow clouds of vapor, creating an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere. There are hydrothermal craters that were formed by underground steam explosions, some reaching up to 20 meters deep. Though not always active, some craters contain mud pools that burble and gurgle due to geothermal gases. Great Lake Taupo is the largest freshwater lake in New Zealand and Oceania. Located in a caldera, the lake is surrounded by volcanic mountains that have gained international fame from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Taupo volcano has not erupted for approximately 1,800 years. However, new data collated over a 42-year period shows that Taupo volcano is active. The Great Lake Taupo is also the location of the volcano of the same name. Taupo is a rhyolitic supervolcano, meaning it has produced eruptions ejecting over 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. The lake itself fills the massive caldera formed by the Oruanui eruption some 25,500 years ago, the largest known eruption in the last 70,000 years. Around the year 232 current era, the Hatepe eruption blasted out pyroclastic flows and ash across the North Island. It's considered the most violent eruption in the last 5,000 years. The Taupo volcanic eruptions have high silica content magma and create more explosive eruptions than basaltic volcanoes. Lake Rotorua is a stunning volcanic lake located in the Bay of Plenty region of the North Island. It's the second largest lake on the island by surface area and sits within the Rotorua caldera, a massive crater formed by a volcanic eruption around 240,000 years ago. Makoia Island is a lava dome protruding from the collapsed caldera, rising to 590 feet above the surface of Lake Rotorua. Though uninhabited today, the island is rich in Maori legend, volcanic history, and ecological significance. Moving right along to the hydrothermal spring and deposits at Waiotapu. Waiotapu Geothermal Wonderland, located in the Taupo volcanic zone, is a vibrant showcase of hydrothermal springs and mineral deposits shaped by intense subterranean activity. Champagne Pool is the star attraction, formed some 900 years ago by a hydrothermal eruption. It's a 65-meter wide crater filled with bubbling CO2-rich water at around 75 degrees Celsius, sourced from deep geothermal reservoirs. The fumes created by the sulfur deposits inundate the entire area with a very characteristic smell. The white color is sinter, silica, and orange and yellows from antimony and arsenic sulfides. Iron gives the pool an intense green color. Trace amounts of gold and silver metals have been found in the pool's sediments, with studies suggesting ore-grade concentrations beneath the surface. Tapuya Geothermal Park, located in Rotorua's Wakarewarewa Thermal Valley, is a dazzling fusion of geothermal wonders, Maori culture, and wildlife conservation. It's one of New Zealand's most iconic destinations. The Pohutu geyser is the largest active geyser in the southern hemisphere, erupting up to 30 meters high, often multiple times per hour. In the vicinity of Rotorua are 65 geysers and more than 500 thermal pools in the Te Wakarewarewa Thermal Valley. It is a mesmerizing blend of geothermal power and living Maori culture. It's home to Wakarewarewa, the living Maori village where the Tuhorangi Ngati Wahiau people have lived for generations, harnessing the valley's natural energy for cooking, bathing, and heating. The Gisborne Airport has a functional railway line that crosses the main runway. This means that a train can travel just a few feet away from a landing airplane. Naturally, the traffic of the area is very well controlled. On the Mahia Peninsula is a small satellite launch company called Rocket Lab. It is considered the first and only privately owned and operated rocket launch facility on Earth. Next up is Tauranga. Tauranga is a coastal metropolitan city in the Bay of Plenty region and the fifth most populous city of New Zealand, with an urban population of 158,000 as of June 2022, or roughly 3% of the national population. It was settled by Maori late in the 13th century, colonized by Europeans in the early 19th century. Wakari, or White Island, is an active andesite stratovolcano located about 30 miles off the east coast of the North Island in the Bay of Plenty. It is New Zealand's most active cone volcano and the peak of a much larger submarine volcano. Wakari is a stratovolcano, also known as a composite cone volcano, built up by layers of andesite lava flows and pyroclastic deposits. Wakari has been in a nearly continuous stage of releasing volcanic gas since it was first sighted by James Cook in 1769. It has a history of sporadic eruptive episodes including phreatic, steam-driven, phreatomagmatic, and strombolian eruptions. The 2019 eruption of White Island was a tragic and highly impactful event that garnered significant international attention due to the presence of tourists on the island at the time of the eruption. The eruption was identified as a phreatic eruption. This type of eruption occurs when superheated water trapped beneath the surface of a volcano flashes to steam and explodes due to a sudden release of pressure. It's not a magmatic eruption where molten rock comes to the surface, but is still incredibly dangerous due to the high temperatures, steam, gases, and ejected rock and ash. At the time of the eruption, there were 47 people on White Island, including tourists, many from a cruise ship, the Ovation of the Seas, along with their tour guides. A total of 22 people died as a result of the eruption, either in the initial blast or from their injuries. This includes 2 individuals whose bodies were never recovered and were later declared deceased. The victims were from various nationalities, including Australian, American, New Zealander, German, Chinese, and British. On-land tours to White Island were immediately suspended and remain so. The New Zealand government closed the island to visitors, recognizing that the eruption highlighted the inherent dangers of the site. We are nearing the end of this presentation, however. Before that, we must turn our attention to the city of Auckland, the largest town in New Zealand. Auckland is big and spread out like Los Angeles and London, but without their populations. It is New Zealand's most populous city and its biggest in land area, surpassing Dunedin in 2010 when Auckland's 7 local authorities and its regional council amalgamated to form the Auckland Super City. It is a city which goes from sea to sea, as you can walk from the Pacific Ocean to the Tasman across Auckland's isthmus. A 10-mile walk will get you from the Waitemata Harbour on the South Pacific Ocean to the Manukau Harbour and Tasman Sea on the other. Both harbours are within the city of Auckland. Looking at the map on the right, you can probably guess that Auckland has a long coastline. You are correct. The total coastline of Auckland is about 1,100 miles, almost exactly the same number of miles as the distance from New York City to Miami via I-95, and only 200 miles less than the distance from Auckland to Sydney. In fact, the length of Auckland's coastline is 200 miles longer than the length of New Zealand. Auckland is most populous urban area in New Zealand and has an urban population of about 1.44 million as of June 2022. The surrounding hills are covered in rainforest, and the landscape is dotted with 53 volcanic centers that make up the Auckland volcanic field. As I mentioned earlier, Auckland is one of the few cities in the world to have a harbour on each of 2 separate major bodies of water. After a British colony was established in New Zealand in 1840, William Hobson, then Lieutenant Governor of New Zealand, chose Auckland as its new capital. He named the area for George Eden, Earl of Auckland, British First Lord of the Admiralty. Wellington became New Zealand's capital in 1865. There are thought to be 50 extinct volcanoes in the Auckland area. Rangitoto is the youngest and largest of the volcanoes of the Auckland volcanic field, having formed in an eruption about 600 years ago and covering an area of 5,710 acres. Auckland's geology, it's all about the volcanoes. This graphic shows all volcanoes in the area, with Poto being the oldest and Rangitoto the youngest. Mount Eden, Mongawau at 643 feet high, is the highest natural point in Auckland. Crater Hill, known as Pukekohe, One Tree Hill, Maungakeiki, another of Auckland's volcanic peaks. The grandfather volcano, Poto, the oldest volcano. The youngest volcano, Rangitoto, is shown in the distance. Thank you for watching, and please press the like button below if you enjoyed this presentation. The like button is that little thumbs up symbol. We are planning to add many more presentations covering a wide variety of science, history, and other enriching subjects, so please subscribe to our channel by pressing the subscribe button below. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to make them, and we will do our best to respond. Again, thanks for watching, and please do subscribe.